Good morning, church. Good morning. Thank you, Pastor Vince, for the introduction. We've been in a series on discipleship for the last 8 weeks. So this is the 8th and last week that we'll be talking about discipleship from Luke chapter 13 and 14. And I have the privilege of wrapping that up. And quite understandably, actually, if you have read along and read what's all happening in the time of Jesus, there was a crowd following Jesus. And help me remind me, like, what was all in those 8 series? Why were they following Jesus? Like, what all happened in the last 7 weeks? What was special? I kind of forgot, like, who remembers? What does it mean to be a disciple? What did we learn? Give us some examples. Remember that woman who was all bent over and Jesus came and he healed her. Imagine being in that crowd who watched that and said, like, wow, this Jesus, he truly has power. He heals people. And he still does that. He doesn't do it always. There's happenings where it doesn't happen. But there are still stories of Jesus healing people. And not only physically, also emotionally. Jesus puts people on their feet again. Spiritually, people who were bent over, he lifts them up and he frees them and gives them life as he intended it. What did you guys talk about last week? I wasn't here. I wasn't Huizen. I think it was the same, but no, guys. The parable of the wedding, of the great banquet wedding, right? It was wonderful. Like, the Jews at the time, and I'm not exactly sure what details got explained here, but the folk at the time, they thought, like, yes, there was from Isaiah, there was this expectation of this banquet that was going to be held, and of the kingdom. And the Messiah would come and invite people to this wonderful banquet. Just one, but first of all, it was probably only going to be for the Jews in their understanding, and not just for all Jews. Like, you'd have to be really good. Like, you couldn't have any physical defects, and you'd have to live this almost perfect life, which basically limited to the Pharisees and other leaders who, at least in their minds, were living a good life. And then Jesus, in that saying, says, like, forget about it. Like, all those who are invited at the first, they will not have part of it. But go out in the streets, in the valleys, in the byways, and invite everybody. Everybody can be part of this wonderful banquet. And then at the end of the story was this punchline. It wasn't only about the banquet. Then Jesus was saying, this is my banquet. Which basically means, he says, like, I am the Messiah. So if you were following Jesus, always something was happening. He would always say something that was unexpected, that would turn things around. He would heal people. If you read the larger stories, like, all kinds of stuff happened. So you have crowds following Jesus. And in the coming weeks, we'll be looking forward to Easter. Next week will be Palm Sunday. What's happening on Palm Sunday? There's this whole crowd of people who are saying, blessed he who comes in the name of the Lord. If we continue the story, many of those will turn away, and a couple of days later we'll say, crucify him, but that's not for this week. But you will see this crowd. The crowd is following Jesus. And then Jesus turned around and he addresses the crowd. And what we will get to is like reading the fine print in the contract, right? Because up to then it's been wonderful, mostly. He also said this stuff like it's actually hard to get into the kingdom of God. It's like it's the narrow way, it's the going through the narrow entrance to get there. So it's not all easy, but still it was mostly quite wonderful. And now you get to the fine print. At least that's what it seems to me a little bit. So let's read it. What does Jesus say in chapter 14, the verses 25 to 35? Large crowds were traveling with Jesus, and turning to them, he said, "If anyone comes to me and does not hate his father and mother, his wife and children, his brother and sisters, yet even his own life, he cannot be my disciple. And anyone who does not carry his cross and follow me cannot be my disciple. Suppose one of you wants to build a tower, will he not first sit down and estimate the cost to see if he has enough money to complete it? For if he lays the foundation and is not able to finish it, everyone who sees it will ridicule him, saying, 'This fellow began to build and was not able to finish.' Or suppose a king is about to go to war against another king. Will he not first sit down and consider whether he is able, with 10,000 men, to oppose the one coming against him with 20,000? And if he is not able, he will send a delegation while the other is still a long way off, and will ask for the terms of peace. In the same way, any of you who does not give up everything he has cannot be my disciple. Salt is good, but if it loses its saltiness, how can it be made salty again? It is fit neither for the soil nor for the manure pit. It is thrown out. He who has ears to hear, let him hear." So we'll consider a few key verses here. If anyone comes to me and does not hate his father and mother, his wife and children, his brothers and sisters, hey, wait a minute, this doesn't fit with the biblical narrative, does it? How does this hold together with that we are called to love God and love our neighbors as ourselves? How does this fit with, examples where we are to honor our parents, other places where we are to care for our children, and here it says like we have to hate them? This doesn't fit. It also doesn't fit with Jesus himself. Like even at the cross, he cares for his mother. He says to John, "This is your mother." He says to his mother, "This is your son." Meaning John is to care for her. So Jesus is not talking here about the emotion of hate. He's not saying that we have to hate our family. If the explanation would be that they cannot be first. Jesus wants to be first. He says, if you put your parents or your children or your spouse or any other family before me, you cannot be my disciple. And blessed are you if you come from a Christian family where everybody applauds when you follow Jesus and everybody's happy when, you get baptized, follow Jesus, and all the rest. But not all of us are. And sometimes our families, are actually quite a point to consider. Like, can we follow Jesus or not? And even if we come from Christian families, it may be difficult. I was for my studies, I had to go abroad for half a year. There was not a fellow student who also happened to be a Christian. And we were both together those 6 months. And not through me, but through somebody else. He came to the conviction that actually he should get baptized. Now, he had been baptized as a child, came from a Christian, very nice Christian family, but he knew that in his church and his family, they would find it very difficult if he would get baptized as an adult. He was engaged. His fiancée came from a similar tradition, so that would be hard as well. She actually was behind him. She said, if you want to get baptized, I'm still with you. But he found it so difficult. And to my knowledge, that's obviously my student days were a while ago. To my knowledge, he's still not yet baptized. It was difficult. My own dear wife, her mom really supported her to study, and with the intention that, she could, in English you would say be her own man, but in this case it's a woman, so. But she could support herself and would not be dependent. That was extremely important to her mom, and the bit sad background that she has. But Yvonne came to faith during her student days and felt like God leading her to do Bible college. And her mother didn't also fully understand what it was. She thought it was some weird kind of sect, so that played into it. But anyways, she said, if you do that, you're not welcome home again. And that was to protect, actually, Yvonne. She still loved Yvonne, I have to say all that. It's all been restored. But at the moment, that was extremely difficult. It was a very tough choice. And lucky for me, Yvonne went to Bible college because that's where we met, and otherwise we would not have our 25th anniversary coming up next month. Yeah, thank you. So there can be really hard choices. And, I'm also thinking of friends of us that we actually met through the same Bible college. They had it on their heart to go to Afghanistan. And they felt really God's call on their life. And they wanted to move ahead with that. Now, they had adult children already. And they said, Mom, Dad, you're crazy. If you do that, we don't want to see you again. Tough. Some of those relationships are partly restored, but it's still tense with, I think, 3 of those kids. And the root was there when they made that decision. So following Jesus and following the call that he sometimes places on our lives can cause conflict with those who are closest to us. Not even to speak of countries where that can be so intense that it may cost your life, right? I mean, it can be more severe than this, but I think those examples may become closer to the reality of most of us. Who do we choose, Jesus or family? Now, this is true for our culture, our day. Back when Jesus spoke this was Middle Eastern culture in his time, obviously. And whereas we have our safety nets in our, social democracy, they didn't have that. So your family also was your safety net. So, if you get into a problem there, it actually, may do more than just, may have more dangers than only the relational part. It could mean quite a bit. And today we've worked in a mostly a Buddhist environment in Asia. There you have this aspect when parents, when they pass away, the children have to do certain rituals. Now, if you become a Christian, you can't do those rituals anymore. So there's this aspect, but wait a minute, what will happen to my soul is not actually a perfect translation of their beliefs, but what happens to my soul if I pass away and my children do not do those rituals? So children, they may feel an extremely high obligation to please their parents. And Jesus is still asking, wait a minute, you cannot be my disciple if you put anybody else before me. And it's pretty black and white. It's not like you can be a 50% disciple. He says, no, you cannot be my disciple. It's either you follow me or you don't. So then he went on, and the second thing that he mentions, even his own life. And anyone who does not carry his cross and follow me cannot be my disciple. And I think when it's about my own, if you love your own life, it's not only about sacrificing your physical life. Actually, for the disciples, for the apostles, for most of them, that actually was a choice. Most of them had to pay the ultimate price for their faith. But for even probably the most people in the crowd that followed Jesus, that was not the case. Could be, but the more difficult part is that we lay down our own priorities, our own wishes, and we sacrifice them, we bring them to Jesus and give him the ultimate say about our lives. And so when Jesus says, take up your cross, he said that earlier. It's not the first time. There's in Luke chapter 9, he speaks about taking up your cross daily and to deny yourself. Like folk who would physically really pick up their cross, they'd have to do it only once because afterwards they'd be crucified and that was it. And that was only for criminals. And when Jesus spoke this, it was probably weird to the hearers because we know that Jesus was crucified, but that was not their expectation of what was going to happen. They would think this is weird. But they would understand, it's not a fun thing. It's hard. But Jesus basically says, if you follow me, there is this aspect of self-denial, of giving up, of giving Jesus the ultimate say about everything in your life. And you may have heard this before, but the difference is, before you become a Christian, before you give your life to Jesus, it is I, and it's standing upright, and it's proud, and it's tall, and it's about you. If you become a Christian, it bends into the sea of Christ, right? So this may almost contradict the earlier thing when Jesus lifts people up and makes them, heals them and restores them. But there's also this aspect of bending, of bowing your knees and let Jesus be truly King. And then it's not your self-life. I think sometimes I'm worried about Christianity when it's turned into a way of you have your life that you want to live, you have your wishes, and you become a Christian and you basically ask God to fulfill whatever you want. And that's called blessing. But that's not actually true. That is not the real gospel. This is yes, God does bless us in many ways, but he asks us to sacrifice and give him the ultimate say about what we do with our lives. And there will be this aspect of self-denial always. I work for a Christian organization, mission organization, and I was attending an event where many organizations present themselves. And I was looking at the banners that the organizations use. And most banners, they would have the name of the organization and some slogan like their mission statement, vision statement. And of course, those statements are all a little bit, they're not all exactly the same, but fairly similar. The other thing that I found striking was similar, that in many of the banners, there was this appeal to adventure, right? You would see beautiful mountains and usually a young person with a backpack on and ready to take on the world, have an adventure with God. Now, it certainly is an adventure to walk with God. And, my wife and I, we've Vince mentioned it, we've been in missions. And it's a big adventure. It was, in a way, it was wonderful. But that's not what Jesus is calling to. It's sort of like a byproduct always, so sometimes. So when we had to design new banners for our organization, I said, I don't want that. Put a big cross in the middle. And then we had people, the folk that we work with. Because, two things. We bring the message of the cross, the message of reconciliation with God the Father through the price that Jesus paid on the cross. And secondly, if you want to be part of this mission of God, you have to follow the way of the cross. You have to follow this way where you take up your cross, where you put down your own wishes to follow Jesus. And and it may cost you something, right? I shared also in the first service, like, I don't hear God talking to me a lot. Like some people, they claim to hear him like every day or so, or every second day. I don't have that. But one time I felt like God was saying, like, are you willing to give me back your studies, your degree, and let me do with it however I want? So yeah, that's fine. I had studied tropical agriculture with the aim of using that in mission. But I had to give that back, and so like if you want to use it, it's fine. If not, that's also fine. Great. A few days go by, and that same question comes back. And I thought, like, we already talked about this. Like, it's strange. But that impression just kept coming. So I answered again, it's fine, it's okay. If you want to use it, it's fine. If you don't want to use agriculture, that's also fine. Again, a couple of days later, that same question came back again, and I thought, like, am I losing it? Or, am I hearing correctly? Or am I getting delusional? Or what's happening? But just that sense was coming back again. So I answered a third time, and then I asked God, like, why does this come back 3 times? And then the thought came up that I actually finished 3 studies, and it was like I had to give each of them back to God. And in the end, he did use it. I worked in agriculture in Asia for a while as, part of what we were doing and related to that mission. But it was not the guiding thing anymore. Like later on, like now I don't do anything with agriculture anymore. Still like it, and I think we all will have our things where God will ask us, like, whatever job you have, whatever studies you have, are you willing to sacrifice that? And I was also thinking of somebody we know. She had a very good practice, earning quite some money in the New Age world. And when that person became a Christian, she had to give that up because you can't combine those things. And will you then sacrifice that as you follow Jesus, or does that become a problem? Lots and lots of people, if they come to Jesus when they're still single, fall in love with somebody who's not a Christian. That's simply the reality. We are not shielded from that. It happened to me as well. And what do you do then? Like, do you follow your emotions? Or do you say, no, I cannot be united, unequally yoked. I cannot, that will not allow me to follow the path that God has for me. Right, so, and those choices, they are often hard. But that is what Jesus asks of us, to follow him. And Jesus gives, and I think often it's like, are we willing to keep everything in an open hand and really surrender to Jesus? And Jesus is giving 2 illustrations. One is of somebody who builds a tower. Anybody ever built a tower here? No, I also don't see anybody building towers in their backyards. So it's maybe not something that we relate to very easily, but maybe somebody who renovated their house or redid their house. I know of somebody here. Quite a decent job, Mike. You're still in it. Well, okay, good. But this is something we've all most of us will have experienced. Now, imagine you got this wonderful plan, And you think like, okay, I want to have like a floor heating, and those windows are old. Let's have triple glass windows and a few other things. And you rip out the glass and you rip out the floor and you knock down a wall. And then, oh, wait a minute, the money is gone. That's a bit awkward if you invite your neighbors over coffee or for dinner, and everything is out. So that's basically the illustration that Jesus is using. So he says, like, before you decide whether you become a follower of me, count the cost. Like, is it worth it? The second illustration is about this king who goes to war. I trust that nobody of us has been in that position, but we've seen a few of those situations in the last couple of years. And even there you see some miscalculations. But anyways, those are costly things to consider. Like if you start building a house or renovate your house, or when a war is being waged, like sort of everything is on the table. Like, it's a big thing. So that's what those two stories or those two illustrations have in common. They are really substantial happenings. The second thing that they have in common is that Jesus says, like in both instances, you sit down and you calculate the cost. You get out your calculator and you say, can I do it or can I not do it? Which in a way is quite different. It's a rational process, which is rather different than many of the emotional appeals that we may be used to in more evangelical Pentecostal circles. It's rather rational. Are you willing to do it or not? Like, stick with it or don't. And it's either a yes or no. And then, emotion has its place as well. That's all fine. But there's also this element of counting the costs. Is it a yes or is it a no? And then Jesus comes back to it again in verse 33, where he says, like, likewise, where's verse 33? It's somewhere else in the Dutch Bible. In the same way, any of you who does not give up everything he has cannot be my disciple. Now, at that time, it could be fairly literal, like we know how Jesus called, his first disciples. They were literally leaving their nets behind, leaving, their father, fishermen behind, and following Jesus physically. In that sense, there's no physical Jesus to follow. But figuratively, it's still the same, right? If we decide, yes, we follow Jesus, we are willing to leave all that behind. And I was thinking also of baptism in this. What is a baptism? It is a lot of things, but it also includes this element where you say, I leave my old life behind, including what I used to live for, and I am raised in newness of life, living in a new kingdom with a new master, following his will rather than my will. And Paul also relates it with, like, I am crucified to the world and the world is crucified to me. Meaning that things that, we used to live for, they are not the ultimate thing anymore. That at least is the calling that we have. And I think I had to think of how many Hindu people, what is their experience if they hear about Jesus Christ, and what's the parallel with us? So there's different streams in Hinduism, but mostly it's like there's a plurality of gods, some higher, some more powerful, some less powerful, and the smartest thing to do is be friends with all of them or don't upset them. And then you hear about Jesus, who's also God, about God the Father. And, well, why not add him to those zillion gods that are already there. It doesn't really make a lot of difference. Except that this new God, Jesus, demands that you do away with all the old gods. You can't keep them in. No idols, right? And that's where it becomes difficult. Maybe some of us, but most of us probably do not come from a Hindu background. But the question is basically very similar. Like, we may have all those things that we used to live for, but they have to become secondary. And if God asks us to give them up, we'd even have to give them up. And that's where we cannot simply add Jesus to it. Now, I don't know, many of you will have management training or trainings in how to have certain talks, and in some of those trainings, maybe not even the best ones, but still some of those trainings, you will have, if you have a negative message for somebody, you start with something positive. Make them feel, at ease first, and then you come with the negative. And then at the end, you say something positive again, right? Jesus didn't have that training, unfortunately. Well, maybe he knew better how to deliver bad news. I don't know. What he does here, like, read it again, like it's terrible. Salt is good, but if it loses its saltiness, how it can be made salty again? It is neither fit for the soil nor for the manure pile. It is thrown out. Well, what a way to end this, right? Like, if the salt, we are the salt of the world. But if we don't live this, we are fit for nothing. Not for the land, nor for the manure pile. Like, what worse can it be? Like, you're not even fit for the manure pile. Oh, man. But that's how Jesus does it, so I'm not going to add anything to that. The choice is ours, right? What do we want to do? And maybe we are like that crowd. Like, Jesus doesn't say this from the beginning. He first gives them, his followers, an opportunity to get to know him. He gives them an opportunity to first hear more of what he had to say before he says those, fairly demanding, harsh words. And maybe some of us are in a similar situation. Like, maybe you've heard parts of the gospel, some of those wonderful parts where Jesus brings restoration, where he brings, he unites us with God the Father. He forgives our sins, he heals you, he does wonderful things. He loves you, he always will. And now this thing comes, wait a minute, do I really have to give things up? Can I not be my own boss anymore? And Jesus is gentle, right? It doesn't sound always that gentle here, but I think he is. He is inviting us to that life with him and to this place of real surrender. And what I would like to do this morning is have about 1 minute. A minute is long, actually, when you actually do it. Have about 1 minute of quiet reflection and prayer, and then I will close off in prayer, asking for grace to live this life. And then you respond to God however you wish to respond to this message. Lord Jesus, I want to thank you for who you are. I thank you for what you have done for us. Thank you that you have come from God the Father, came down to this world, that you have taken up your cross before you ask us to take up our cross, that you have led the way, that you have given your life, Thank you that you have restored us, that you have reconciled us to God the Father, something that we could never do, however much we take up our cross or whatever we would do. But that you have accepted us, that you have restored us as your sons and daughters, that we can live eternally with you, knowing that we are loved, that we are wanted, that we will reign with you. Thank you that you invite us into your kingdom. Share with us all your goodness. Lord, if we come to this place where you say, okay, but in order to be my disciple, you have to give up your life. You have to put your own wishes secondary. Only allegiance to Jesus Christ above all. Lord, I ask for grace for myself and for everybody here and for everybody who's listening to say yes to this invitation, to be your disciple according to those conditions that you laid down in this chapter. So I pray in Jesus' name. Amen.